Today, we're going to talk about the incredible, century-long story of a single infantry regiment. And believe me, their journey spans continents, empires, and some of the biggest conflicts in modern history.
And before we even get to the battles, their story really starts with how they looked. They had this unique, really striking uniform that made them stand out on any battlefield. But this is about so much more than a uniform. These guys were a truly global force. I mean, their battlefield was literally the world, from the shores of Japan all the way to the trenches in France.
So let's get into it. This is the story of the 129th Baluchis, a regiment forged in the 19th century that left a massive mark on the 20th.
Okay, so where does this all begin? We have to go way back to 1846 on the Sind frontier. That's when the 2nd Baluchi Battalion was formed, on the orders of General Sir Charles Napier. This unit was the seed from which everything else would grow.
And right from the start, these guys stood out. I mean, forget your standard khaki uniform. They wore this rifle green tunic, a kurta, and paired it with these incredibly bright, vibrant red trousers. And the men who joined were just as diverse, a real mix of martial peoples from all over the region. Baluchis, Sindhis, Pathans, Punjabi Muslims, and Brahouis.
We often think of them in the context of the World Wars, and we'll get there, but long before that, this regiment was already earning its reputation all over the globe, serving as a really key part of the British Empire's military machine.
And their early service record is just wild. I mean, within just a few decades, they'd fought in Persia, they went to China to help deal with the Taiping Rebellion, and then, get this, in 1864, they became the very first foreign troops ever to be stationed in Japan, in Yokohama. On top of that, you've got campaigns in Afghanistan and Egypt. This was a regiment of seasoned, well-traveled veterans before the 20th century even kicked off.
So as we roll into the 1900s, the Army gets a big shakeup, and the regiment's name changes. They officially become the 129th Duke of Connaught's own Baluchis, and that's the name they would carry into their biggest and toughest fights. And then comes 1914. The world just explodes into war. And the 129th Baluchis, they were called up to face their ultimate test. They weren't sent to some colonial frontier this time. No, they were sent to the industrial slaughterhouse of the Western Front in Europe.
And I mean, they were thrown right into the fire, no warm-up. The 129th Baluchis hold this really important distinction of being the very first Indian regiment to launch an attack on the Germans in World War I. They were at the tip of the spear from the very beginning.
Now, in the middle of all this chaos, at the First Battle of Ypres, something incredible happens. A soldier, Sepoy Kudadad Khan, was manning a machine gun. His whole team was taken out, and he was badly wounded, but he kept fighting, holding off the enemy advance all by himself. For that, he was awarded the Victoria Cross. That's Britain's highest medal for bravery, and he became the very first Indian soldier to ever receive it.
But that kind of heroism, it came at a price that is just staggering. Out of 4,447 men from the regiment who served in the war, they suffered 3,585 casualties. Just let that sink in. That's over 80%. The unit was basically shattered and had to be rebuilt over and over again. But their sacrifice, their skill, it did not go unnoticed. After their time in France, they were sent to fight in German East Africa, and their reputation was so fierce that even their main opponent, the brilliant German commander, General von Lettow-Vorbeck, gave them what might be the ultimate compliment from a fellow soldier. They were, he said, without a doubt, very good.
So, you'd think after the absolute trauma of World War I, they'd get a break, right? Nope. The world was changing fast, and the regiment had to keep adapting and evolving.
The action just kept coming. They were immediately involved in another war in Afghanistan, and then a revolt in Iraq. Then in 1922, the whole British Indian Army gets a big overhaul. The 129th was merged with 5 other Baluch battalions, and together they formed the new 10th Baluch Regiment. The 129th's new identity was now the 4th battalion of this larger group.
And when the world went to war for a second time, they were right back in it. The battalion served with distinction all over, from East Africa to the deserts of North Africa, all the way to the mountains of Italy. And once again, their performance was incredible. They earned a ton of awards for bravery, and once again, it came at a heavy cost, with more than 1,600 casualties.
Okay, so after 2 world wars, the entire world is changing. The British Empire is starting to unravel, and that leads to this huge, pivotal moment, the partition of India in 1947. So what happens to a historic regiment like this, with a century of legacy tied to the British?
Well, the answer comes when the British Indian Army is divided up. The Baluch Regiment, which included the 4th Battalion, the direct descendants of our 129th, was allocated to the newly independent nation of Pakistan. A century of service under the British Crown was over. A whole new chapter was about to start.
And that legacy, it just keeps going, completely unbroken. As the 4th Battalion, they fought in the 1948 war over Kashmir. Later on, after a 1956 Army merger, they became the 11th Battalion, and they fought under that name in the big Indo-Pakistani wars of 65 and 71. And today, the direct lineage of that unit, raised all the way back in 1846, it continues, serving as the 11th Battalion of Pakistan's Baluch Regiment.
And that just leaves you with this really fascinating thought, doesn't it? This regiment's identity was forged serving an empire, but its spirit, its traditions, its legacy, they were strong enough to outlast that empire. It found a new purpose and just kept writing its story under a new flag. It's a powerful reminder that the history of a unit like this is, in the end, the history of its people.